Right, so today we're talking about the fact that eczema isn't a condition of steroid deficiency. So why are we using synthetic cortisol to manage eczema? So essentially the chat's going to be about conventional medicine and where there's some gaps in the system. So if there's anybody tuning in, drop a little hello, and I do like these to be interactive. So even if you are watching the replay, follow along and comment as well. Okay, so firstly, I want to say thank you for everybody who's contributing to the community. I saw a couple posts this week, and there was just so much support, supporting each other. So that's the aim of the game. And there were some really great suggestions and lots of tips, which is really great, so we can help each other. So I'm going to dig deep because it appears that some people are getting caught on just looking at surface level approaches. So I thought I would chat about that this week and about digging a little bit deeper and going beyond just using creams and why only using creams and only trying to identify your allergens when you go to the allergist or dermatologist, get the patch testing, why only doing that outside in approach is what keeps most people stuck. And look, I don't want to be sounding like I'm anti-conventional medicine because I'm not at all. Conventional medicine and where we're at today with medicine is great, but there are definitely some gaps. And the thing is that I just want to create awareness of where those gaps are so people can do some research themselves and make an informed decision if they want to use creams and if they want to start investigating and start the healing journey from the inside out. So with doctors, just as the side note, like they only get, I think it's between 3 to 4 hours of nutrition training in their studies. So I've actually done nutrition lectures and talks at Western Uni in California because all of the med students are like, I don't know anything about nutrition. And a lot of them were going to do placements and they're like, it is really awkward when people are asking about it, but there's just a big gap that way. So yeah, I have nothing against doctors, but if you have either been to the doctors, dermatologists, allergists, or if you haven't, this is going to save you a lot of time and a lot of money. So first of all, for the people that are watching or anybody that watches the replay, I would like to know, just to get a gauge of where you're at, what you guys have tried. Is it creams, maybe diet, or alternative therapies? I'm going to chat about some alternative therapies next week, but I'd like to get a little bit of a gauge of where you guys are at. And then we can kind of talk around that. And then at the end, I'm going to chat about why steroids are effective and why they are not, which is a really interesting one. Okay, so just to like baseline approach with everything, creams and allergens. So the conventional way of looking at eczema is that it's just a skin condition. And I think anybody who has struggled with chronic eczema realizes that it's so much more than that. It's not just itchy skin. It's not just red rashes. You can feel your body like overheating. It used to feel like a fire inside my body and it felt like a volcano erupting. And we know that there is a big emotional and like mental toll that it takes, and it just affects everything. And when you start getting in tune with your body, you can also feel that you're getting reactive to different things. So it's not just because you have allergies and it's not just the weather. There's stuff happening inside your body that's creating inflammation. And so that's where there's a gap, because if you go to a doctor or dermatologist, the way that they're trained is that, okay, here's an effective steroid. And steroids can be really, really effective until they're not. And so the reason, like, they use that as, and this is what I call a Band-Aid approach, because it reduces the inflammation. But they're not looking at what's causing the inflammation. So it's very rare that a doctor is going to say, oh, you have eczema, let's look at your biochemistry and let's look at your blood work. Or let's looking at what's happening in your gut. You know, sometimes they'll ask you what you're eating, and then very, very, very rare they're going to ask, well, like emotionally, how are you feeling? Like what's happening with anxiety, stress, has there been trauma, that sort of thing. All of those things impact it because your skin is a reflection of what's happening inside. So if you have a fire of inflammation on your skin, you have a fire of inflammation inside your body. I've seen the blood markers, I've seen the symptoms, I've seen all the tests, so I know this is a fact. So that's where there's a little bit of a gap. So conventional medicine, they're just looking at the outside and they use that Band-Aid solution, so which is effective, but it's not getting to the root cause of what's causing the inflammation. Let me know in the comments if that makes sense. Because when we start digging deep, and what doctors will talk about is, okay, it has to do with your immune system, because eczema is a condition of dry skin plus an immune response. You can have one or the other, right? So for the people in the group who have had some rashes and they've used some creams, oh, great. Like if that's fixed it, perfect. But if you're one of those people like I used to be that had chronic rashes everywhere and the creams aren't working, you've done the testing, you've done the diets, we need to be digging deeper. So yeah, it's when you can understand that your immune system's in overdrive, then we can start workshopping. Okay, there's an immune response. What's causing inflammation? Does that make sense? I hope so. Because yeah, and this is where there's a big gap, and it's where a lot of people, we posted a video, I think recently, about Christine and her journey. I always use Christine as an example because she had spent upwards of $30,000 trying to find a solution, and nobody had said, well, hey, let's look at the gut, you know, how are you feeling emotionally? And that's where there's the gap, right? Or a lot of times it's, let's figure out your triggers, or you might do some testing, some patch testing, and then they're just like, avoid it and take an antihistamine, which is also a Band-Aid solution. So yeah, the whole idea, and this is the difference between conventional medicine is more of that outside-in approach. You get some quick results, which is totally fine if you do need to use medications as a crutch, but then where you can get into like looking from the inside out and more alternative therapies is when we're understanding, well, where is your inflammation coming from within my body and how can I manage that? Because, and this is what's the long-term solution. Okay. Hopefully that made sense for you guys. Drop me a yes if you're still, if I didn't lose you. Okay. So next thing is topical steroids. So this is a little bit of a paradox because, well, why are we putting steroids on our skin, which gets absorbed into our bloodstream, when we don't actually have a steroid deficiency? Because those cortisone creams that you're using are steroids. So it's a synthetic form of cortisol that we make in our body. And so if anybody, does anybody know what cortisol is? If you do, drop it in the comments. It does many things actually, but it's your stress hormone. It's also energy hormone. It's what, when like with your blood glucose, it's what gives you energy. So whenever your blood glucose goes up from stress, that's cortisol that gives you energy. It also helps you when you are in fight and flight and you have high stress, you need to run away from that tiger, which doesn't happen anymore, but it's part of that stress response. So it's actually highly anti-inflammatory, which is why a lot of people get itchy at night. Everybody says that, and they're like, they think it's just me. It's every single person. Everybody that has eczema that has the itch part of it, it's itchy at night. And so the reason is because you have high cortisol in the morning, and then it tapers down. And then low cortisol, low energy, time for melatonin, okay, time for bed. That anti-inflammatory effect that cortisol naturally has goes down. So I think a lot of people can relate to that with the itch scratch cycle. If you can relate to that, comment itch scratch cycle below. So then what you can do from that is, because I always try and help clients work upstream, okay? So if we know that works, then, okay, what they've done is they've created synthetic cortisol, which blocks that inflammatory response. And it blocks it effectively. But the thing is that, and this is a whole other topic, topical steroids, because your body can become dependent on them, they have to only be used for a short period of time. And that, again, I'll use Christine and Mandy. She did an interview too. They weren't given that advice or those instructions, and they used it long term. And it is really, really hard coming off steroids. Not everybody gets it, but topical steroid withdrawal is a real thing, and you wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy. So I mean, that's a topic for another day, so I don't want these conversations to be too long, but if that is something if that interests you, drop steroids below and I can do a training on that. But yeah, so does that essentially, I'll kind of summarize that. Does that make sense? So you have cortisol that's naturally made in your body, and it's naturally anti-inflammatory. Because if you're running away from that tiger, like the high stress or high energy, you can't have inflammation in your body. So it's anti-inflammatory. But so it's effective. And then so that's why they use it as a steroid, right? To block the inflammation on your skin. But what happens is it goes into your bloodstream and it is systemic. And long term, we want to be thinking, okay, well, why do I have that inflammation? If we're using that topical steroid to block an inflammatory response, well, let's start working upstream and understanding where is that inflammation coming from. Because then I don't have to be dependent on these rashes, because then I don't have to be caught in flare-ups and have these unpredictable flare-ups. You don't know when they're going to come. It's just such a weight on your shoulders. Like, I totally get it. My whole life used to be run by my rashes. Like, I would, even if I was in a period of clear skin, I would still be stressing, when am I going to get a flare-up? Oh, I have an event coming up in the weekend. Am I going to be getting a flare-up? Like, it's anybody who hasn't had eczema, they would never understand just that level of anxiety in the back of your mind of how unpredictable these rashes are. So this is what, like, the whole idea of having this group and trying to create awareness of it is that these topical steroids are a Band-Aid solution. And so that's great. Medications are great. They're effective. We have, like, our lifespan has increased by twofold. But if we want to be looking more at preventative way to approach this and how to heal it long term, it's by understanding where the inflammation is coming from in your body. And if anybody's here, either on the video right now or watching it later, if you have started investigating your root cause, drop it below, because it might help some other people. And I can also give you guys some guidance. So let me know if all of that makes sense. And yeah, the main thing is we want to be using these medications, like if it's an antihistamine and or a topical steroid or an immunosuppressant, we want to be using it for a period of time while you're workshopping where the inflammation is coming from in your body. Because it's a Band-Aid solution. When you stop using it, the rashes come back. I've had hundreds of people go through the program. I've worked with a lot of people, and it's the exact same situation for everybody, me included. So you want to be understanding where inflammation is coming from inside the body, rather than just using that Band-Aid solution. And if you don't have a steroid deficiency of cortisol, and you don't have a hyperimmune condition where you're not producing cortisol, why are we putting it in our body? So that's my conversation today. So if that was helpful, let me know below, and I'll be doing these lives every week. And I would love to hear your main takeaway from the video. And if you do want us to connect you with any resources, drop a little emoji below, and somebody from the team will reach out. Have a good weekend. I'll chat to you guys next week.